You have your idea on paper, and now what the heck do you do? You could just hop in without a plan and try and save face later, or you could get a few ducks in a row before launching to make sure the whole thing won't just blow up in your face. Don't call yourself an organizer without being organized. We're talking finding teams and building organizations. This is Knuckles on Doors, and I'm Ben Marcus. Okay, so welcome to episode 2. Everyone, tells me that the step between 1 and 2 is huge, and everything after feels like a piece of cake. So let's hope that holds true. I know I certainly felt some good motivation to keep it rolling. So thank you to everyone who has taken a listen and is sticking around for this one. Please comment, like, subscribe, rate, etc. on one or multiple mediums where Knuckles and Doors can be found. It's iTunes, Stitcher, Google Play, all sorts of places. I think you can subscribe by email. There's all sorts of ways to look. You can find it all on knucklesondoors.com, and it has all that info. It definitely seems like the best way to grow leadership is to kind of put it all out there through multiple mediums. So I'm sure the more I put out, though, the larger the audience will grow organically as well. Also, keep sending in those guest ideas. I've gotten a great response, and I'm starting to line people up. So my vision for a legit build-out podcast is actually coming together nicely, I think. I'd love for people to start sending in their own issues as well, so we can run through individual situations and learn from each other. That's by far going to be the best way for others to get motivated and generate ideas. Organizing requires a fair amount of creativity and a willingness to embrace rapid change in plans, so it's important you're comfortable, at least, with what you're pursuing. That's why I wanted to run through the exercise of putting the idea down on paper in the first episode. I want to truly help people build their effort from the very beginning, keeping an eye on the prize, so to say. Unfortunately, folks have a tendency to get stuck in either analysis paralysis, where they have a basic plan but don't have the team or confidence, or they have a missing piece or whatever, or have a difficult time transitioning their emotional energy to actions because the first step just isn't visible. That's what I'm here for. That's what this show is here for. Like I said in the first episode, the first little bit of this thing is going to be a step-by-step guide to revving up a local campaign or advocacy effort and putting it on a good foot. Then we'll move into general discussion about how the whole thing works. My hope is to generate content that inspires others to action and makes organizing and civic participation more understandable and less scary. In fact, we're going to have our first guest in the next couple of weeks, and I think what I'll do is have, for the time being, my interviews be in between these kind of episodes, and maybe later on we'll integrate them into a fuller show. So to briefly rehash episode 1, it's important to put what you're doing into context and understand the basic moving parts of a campaign. We covered the basics of my unified theory of organizing, the 3 Ps, and talking about the relationship between passion, people, and a plan, and the necessity to ensure each piece is included in your strategy to get that win. Passion is what drives a campaign. It's people's willingness to participate physically, financially, or simply just the overall public opinion of the issue and your take on it. People refers to staff, volunteers, constituents, and voters, without whom obviously your idea will never move beyond just an idea. And plan is the strategy, tactics, systems, and metrics you would use to track progress and achieve your goals. I have a Venn diagram I uploaded to knucklesondoors.com in the resources section, so you can download it and think on it. One of my goals is to use this podcast, the research I'm involved in, and future academic and professional opportunities to really build out this theory. You can help majorly by giving feedback and asking questions about the whole thing. The important part is to simply recognize and understand the relationship between all three, however. You can have passion and people, but no plan and be lost. Passion and a plan, but no people can be stranded. And a plan and people, but no passion is totally lifeless. A campaign that wins on its own merits and not just because the opposition made some poor choices can negate these challenges and bring all three pieces into an optimal situation. As you may have personally experienced, putting the plan into motion is typically the most difficult part for most people to get a plan moving. In episode 1, we went over the 6 basic questions that make up an initial campaign strategic plan and some basics on answering them. Who, what, where, when, why, and how. Who do you need to win? What are you trying to do? Where is this happening? When are the deadlines? Why are you doing this? Which is absolutely the most important question. And how do you intend to accomplish this? I created a very basic 2-page template for you to download and fill in, which you can find at knucklesondoors.com in the resources section if you'd like. But you can also just pull up a Word doc, or you can pull out a piece of paper and just answer these questions. At the end of the day, the answers may change and will probably change, and they'll definitely become more developed. So definitely don't spend too much time on this step. The goal here is to get you thinking more strategically about how to tackle the issue or elect a candidate. And besides, the more substance you save to be worked out with a larger group of constituents and stakeholders, the better. It's all about buy-in when it comes to building a solid, sustainable team to get the work done. I'd love to look at your basic campaign plans too and help whatever way I can. Feel free to send them to knucklesondoors@gmail.com, or even better, post them up on the new forum I added to the website. It'll be a little lonely there for a while, of course, but I'm going to look at and I'll read every single thread in there and I'll help you out. And I think that's a place where the goal is for it to eventually become a resource for organizers to really share ideas and help one another out. Eventually, it'll be fully integrated into the website as well, which is totally awesome. So it's just knucklesondoors.com. You click on forum to get there. We can all rise together in this thing. That's really the name of the game. And we need to contribute what we have to rebuilding American civics. And it's one conversation at a time. There's really no other way out of this. So if all you did was read the news these past couple weeks, you'd really be under the impression that this country is just divided right down the middle. Well, that's really not the case. Driving that kind of zero-sum game narrative is a political system where it's easier to fundraise when people are scared and without hope. Basic sociology, backed by psychology, of course, dictates this behavior. And I'm not one to think it's done on purpose either. I think it's a long, slippery slope that we've gone down. We didn't suddenly just become this divided and this reliant on, $5 donations from scary emails. The reality is, this has been a slow and painful cycle for decades and decades, hell, maybe even a century long. A glance at voter turnout stats will demonstrate a significant drop in the early 20th century, followed by a pretty slow drip, especially in the midterms, to where we are now, right? Where people are just scared of people who are scared, with no other outlets besides 2 private organizations who have a profit motive to keep people scared. Meanwhile, you have 40% of registered voters as independents, and a system that experiences sometimes as low as 35% turnout in midterms. And while the answer as to why this is happening is still very much up for discussion, one thing is clear. Scaring people into supporting your side might work for an election or two, but is horribly damaging to both party membership and general civic participation long term. Combine that with a hyper-focus on national issues over the past 5 decades, and when we get what we have today, we're losing people to the franchise every single cycle, folks. All you have to do is look at the voter registration to get a good idea. People are leaving political parties in droves, especially young people. We're talking about upwards of 50% of young people registering as independents. So it should really be no wonder why these are the same folks most likely to stay home during an election. and the most difficult to bring back into the fold. Ask any local party operation how it's going with recruiting young people for committees, let alone to serve as precinct committeemen and committeewomen. I'll give you a hint. It ain't going so well. I'm of the mindset the more parties return to being vehicles for policy and candidates and leave the segregated talk and money grabs behind, the more successful they will be in registration and turnout. If it's one thing Bernie's campaign has demonstrated, it's a deep thirst for honesty and straightforward politics. People are willing to give for causes they believe in and don't need to be scared half to death to do it. They just need a hope. Think of it like this. Let's say you had a choice between two bakeries in your real small town who are constantly advertising against each other to try and boost their base. But both sold cookies that were just okay. They're just kind of meh. The bakeries, they built their contact lists of supporters and constantly claim that the competitor has rodents and bugs and uses subpar ingredients, even going so far to ask people to start smear campaigns about the other business, right? And how they treat their employees or something. Additionally, these two bakeries never work together, with one big exception: preventing another bakery from setting up shop in town. At first, everyone chooses their preferred bakery, of course, maybe tries a cookie from the other one every once in a while, but settles on their choice. But as they keep receiving more and more emails about the other bakery, one of three things happens to their supporters. Supporters either get more hype about the slanderous bakery's cookies, right? They start going to the other bakery just to slight the negativity, or, most likely, they'll just stop going to both bakeries and try and make their own cookies. The first option is what the bakery is left with to make their money, while the second is what they try and prevent. Meanwhile, the third option, not giving business to either, is what's happening to large portions of their customers, and even larger portions of people who just moved to town. Maybe the new folks will try a cookie from each, kind of pick up on the weird battle that's going on, doesn't make any sense because they're bakeries, and just completely dip out. It's not worth the energy. Who wants to constantly be deciding, what crappy news about their bakery is true or not? Aren't there more important things to do, right? Whatever. That's a totally half-buttered analogy, but clearly issues of poverty and justice aren't cookies, but therein lies the problem. People are making their own communities around stuff that has nothing to do with politics, while continuing to be heavily civic engaged in other ways, and don't be it donating or volunteering or whatever. We're at a time in history where more Americans are donating more time and money than ever before, but we're simultaneously experiencing an exodus from traditional politics. As organizers and activists, and just people who care about the continuation of a democratic republic, basically, this is the central conundrum of our era. How do we adjust our tactics, messaging, and even just basic missions and visions to stop this bleeding? Well, through my experience, conversations, and research, I'm 100% convinced this problem can be solved, but only if we're willing to commit to talking face-to-face about more than what's wrong. We need to be talking about what people have to contribute to the group, not just what the group requires to run or what people can take from the group. While it's hokey, we basically need to find a modern way to translate JFK's call to service. Ask not what your country can do for you, but ask what you can do for your country. But focus more locally in our neighborhoods and cities. We need a little ABCD. That's right, asset-based community development. Now, we'll go much more in depth over the course of this series and podcast in general about asset-based community development, and call it ABCD. But I want to introduce the concept today while we're talking about building out a team of people and kind of getting things moving. Asset-based community development is about looking at people for what they have to offer as opposed to what they need. It's about making sure that stakeholders and constituents truly own the organization by making sure that they're making decisions about what your organization is doing and how you're accomplishing your goals. Again, the Obama campaign did a fantastic job in this regard by empowering their supporters, especially early ones, to basically build the platform and strategy and offer whatever talents they had to contribute to the effort. Now, this doesn't mean you should just build a big bloated group, pursuing whatever happens to be on someone's mind that day. It actually means the total opposite. And it means you'll have to do some work as an organizer to fit people in based on what they're good at. In fact, that's most of your role as an organizer. There are 4 categories where people's individual assets, or gifts as they're called, can be classified. It's called the 4 H's. Yes, it's another letter acronym. These are the 4 H's: hands, head, heart, and human. Definitely won't be the last acronym, that's for sure. Hands refers to anything you can do with them. So you can build a house, you can do plumbing, you can write, you can play instruments, what have you. Head is the things you're good at with your brain, with your old noggin. So that can be being really good at being a tutor, that can be a great strategist. That can be someone who just has a snapshot memory and just can pull information out of their head. There's always a person like that. Heart is what you're passionate about. That's your heart. And your human is your relationships. So it's the people that you know and everything else. I put a graphic of this up on the resources section of knucklesondoors.com. So you can take a look at that and really use it when you're thinking about it. It's pretty basic, but something to think about. It's definitely going to be more applicable a little later on. Maybe like 2 episodes down the line. When you're doing general recruitment for the work, it's just great to put things in the right head. So at the beginning of this journey, however, your focus should be on identifying the people who are necessary to a successful effort. Be it an electoral, advocacy, or other campaign, there will always be people and organizations within your community which need to be on board one way or another. We're going to use a clean water rule as an example, right? You want to get a new clean water rule implemented in your city. In order for that to happen, a majority of the board voting on it needs to be included for it to ultimately pass, right? A majority of the board is going to have to vote in favor. And perhaps there are already members who are supportive of it. So there's nothing like starting your foot in the door. Perhaps there's an existing advocacy organization that's already working on something similar, but kind of from a different angle. Maybe there's some people who are doing some education and working, with poor folks to try and clean their water, but they're not really doing the political stuff. But I'm sure members of that group have significant institutional knowledge about how to get your stuff done. Perhaps there are specific outspoken people in town who are recognizable or really seem to have a grasp on what needs to happen. Whoever they are, including those people in your planning from the very beginning, is essential to a successful effort. People are simply more bought into plans they help design, period. So, as an organizer, you should ensure those extra steps are taken to put your effort in the best place possible. I put a short worksheet up under resources on knucklesondoors.com for you to use in identifying these folks if you'd like. Perhaps through your research, you'll find out you can make it happen with just a little elbow grease and a good old-fashioned lobbying. Sometimes you'll find out they were already planning to address it. Hell, maybe it's already in effect and just not being enforced. There are countless reasons to really try and get the full picture before jumping in. The bottom line is, none of us are in this alone. And to be successful, we have to build knowledgeable, motivated teams of people. Look for organizations that would probably be sympathetic. Walk around the neighborhood and question if it's a hyper-local thing. And find that grandma who's always chilling on the porch. The idea is to really get an idea of what's going on in that haystack when you're going to find those pins. You're better off if you can have an idea of what quadrant it's in, or within a couple of meters or something, before just going digging in. But aside from the specific people you need to pull in your goals to be achieved, you should be thinking about the skill sets you'll need and who possesses them. Even if you don't know the specifics yet of the tactics you're going to be using, it's always a good bet to bring in people who are good communicators, good at recruiting and getting people moving, and just those flat out strategic thinkers who are just always with a million questions in their head. Just like anything else, There's going to be some who are simply better at campaigning and understanding how to move through the political ether, if you will. That doesn't mean that you should deny people a chance to help, just that you should always have your eyes open as an organizer for folks in the pack who really need to maybe have a seat at the leadership table. So remember, at this point, you have your 6 questions, but not a whole lot of substance to your plan. That's where these initial people come in. Think about who can give the best guidance about getting this thing done, who knows the system in and out. Ask questions, find those people, start with your own network and branch out. It's all just about putting yourself out there as a magnet for the issue and seeing who's most attracted to it. Your job is to get the conversation rolling in the right networks so the cream rises to the top and you can skim it off for good use. When getting things moving, especially early on, it's more than important to build personal relationships with your team members and to build trust within the group. Meeting regularly over beer or coffee, especially beer, with an agenda, of course, which we'll get to next episode, I think, is a great way to get the ice broken and the conversation moving. If you're more pressed for time, this tactic still works well. Go grab a beer or something, but you'll have to have a little bit more structure to what you're doing to make sure you don't miss your marks. And again, we'll deal with that next time. If it's impossible to meet in person as a group, if your essentials are within a reasonable distance, get in your car and start driving. If it's truly impossible, then I guess phone. Although now with Google Chat and Skype and all these other FaceTime, there's all these great services where you can actually be face to face still. So use that before you use phone. Regardless, make sure when you're meeting up for the first time to just really take it slow. Again, unless you're really rushed, try and take it slow. Get to know one another, ask questions, find out where everybody kind of sits. The people you're talking to at this stage should really be knowledgeable about what you're trying to do. So you should really be thinking about building a relationship and picking their brain. And hopefully they'll be able to provide some good input, not just about what their role is in the whole thing, but what you can be doing better and who else needs to be involved in this thing. It's all about networks. One way or another, you as an organizer need to connect personally to as many people as you possibly can. Think of yourself as a wrangler. Your job is to keep stakeholders and constituents facing in the right direction and executing the right tactics at the right time. If there's no trust, however, you're much less likely to get that action out of people. One of the easiest ways to build trust is through real-life conversation, especially over food and drink. Who doesn't like beer, wine, drinks with some politics and idealism, right? Seriously, so hop on it. An organizer is at their best when they have a bank of constituents to call on and to speak up on the issue at hand. Your job, whether as a campaign manager or candidate, or you're a lead organizer for an issue or something, is to find stories and push them to the front for everyone else to hear. If the goal is to change people's minds or recruit people to your cause, there's no better way than by connecting to people through their own lives, but as told by other people. This isn't to say you shouldn't speak, but your role is more the advisor and strategist and less the public figurehead. In fact, try hard to not be the figurehead. Please try hard to not be the figurehead. I know the inclination can be to pick up that flag and just start waving it as hard as you can. I really get that. But try and follow a methodical path to the finish line. The stumbling and roadblocks ahead are going to be fierce, and they're going to knock you off the ball if you don't have a plan in place and people to hold you up. At the center of any successful political operation is an organizer who's willing to be a bit in the shadow of the constituents that they're serving. Decision makers want to hear from people who will be directly impacted. If that's you as well, in addition to being the organizer, then by all means speak up, but only do so limited. Otherwise, do a quick intro, maybe make people laugh, do a little thing, and get them pumped, and then quickly hand it off to the folks who should really be speaking. You're the stage manager. You're not the lead play. You're the stage manager. All right, so that's basically what I have for you this week. We talked about the importance of an effective team. We talked about the need to interact directly with one another and face-to-face if possible. We talked about spending time researching the constituencies and communities you're trying to change. We talked about what it means to be a good organizer. So all pretty good stuff. I put the graphic up in the resources section at knucklesondoors.com along with that basic worksheet so people can kind of figure out who they should be talking to. Next episode, we'll deal with how to run meetings and set agendas, specifically with your executive team. I guess we'll call it your executive team, these essential folks. We'll also talk about setting initial roles and your goals and getting general communication strategy moving and everything else. Now we're really moving along and it's time to start talking strat. I'll start a list of good books to read and throw it up on the website too in the next week or so, and would love your suggestions. This is a totally democratized forum, even if it's just 2 contributors right now, so please add more. Remember to send in your plans if you want me to help out. The email address is knucklesondoors@gmail.com, or feel free to post them up on the forum, which you can get to at knucklesondoors.com. It's brand new, but I will absolutely reply to every post up there. Hopefully more folks will see this podcast in the forum and contribute as well. And I thank you for listening, and I'll see you next time. Music is The Hustle by the Paula Brothers.